Hello, and welcome back for another Fireside Chat featuring Unicycive, who trades under the symbol UNCY on the NASDAQ. For today's Q&A discussion, I'm joined by Shalabh Gupta, the founder, chairman, and CEO of the company. Shalabh, welcome.
Thank you.
If we could just start by, if you could just give us kind of a quick and dirty about your background and, kind of where you come from.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. And for those audience who are tuning in, thank you for your time. My background is a trained physician. I practiced medicine for a decade in New York at the Academic Medical Center, NYU Hospital. I was a faculty as well as an attending physician. I have a graduate degree in finance. And with regard to biotech career, I've been in this industry for over 20 years. I started my career early on while I was my training, then went to work with a investment bank as an analyst covering biotech stocks, covered pharmaceutical stocks. I worked for Genentech and corporate strategy group and founded and started two companies prior to Unicycive. I started this company in 2016 and acquired in real world and real sense in 2018, two different drugs that launched the company. We took it public in 21. And here we are about to get the drug approval and launch the drug this year.
Shalabh, that's great. For the people who are not as familiar with Unicycive, can you give us a quick, brief introduction?
We're a clinical stage biotechnology company focused on treatment of kidney diseases. Our lead drug, oxylentham carbonate, is a drug which is indicated for treatment of hyperphosphatemia. That is, patients who are on dialysis and have high phosphate. Hyperphosphatemia is a condition that happens in patients who are on dialysis. Roughly 500,000 patients in the US are on dialysis every year, and roughly 80% of them, that is 400,000 or so, patients need something to manage their phosphate. We have a second drug, which is for treatment of acute kidney injury. This is a drug that we received an orphan disease designation last year, which is 2024. This drug is currently in discussion with FDA to start a phase 2 clinical trial or phase 1/2 clinical trial in the US. We finished phase 1 clinical trial for the drug in the UK last year.
Great. Let's talk about OLC real quick. Why do you think it has the potential to be a best-in-class option for patients with chronic kidney disease who have and I'm going to try, hyperphosphatemia?
Yes. Roger, in order to understand the best-in-class profile, you have to just give me 2 minutes to set the stage. What is the problem, where we are with the current treatment? Hyperphosphatemia, or plain simple English, high phosphate, happens to patients who suffer from chronic kidney disease. Chronic kidney disease is a progressively worsening problem. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens over years, over decades. Patients who suffer from high blood pressure, hypertension, patients who suffer from chronic diabetes, all of these conditions, they eventually lead to kidney damage because kidneys and liver are two places, two organs in our body that ultimately bear the responsibility of getting anything and everything out of our body. So the food, water, alcohol, any medication a patient takes, anything that we consume, that is all going to be metabolized and excreted by kidney or liver. Chronic kidney disease affects 17% of US population. That is, 1 in 7 adults suffers from chronic kidney disease. The stages of chronic kidney disease are divided into stage 1 through 5. Stage 5 is when patients are in a terminal stage in which kidneys have almost stopped working. Of these patients in end-stage kidney disease, these patients, majority of them are on dialysis. The number of patients who are on dialysis, I started by saying, is roughly 500,000 every year. There are 6 approved treatments in the US. With 6 approved treatments over the last decade plus, phosphate control has been a problem. 75% of US patient population does not have adequate level of phosphate control. And the reason I'm saying this now begs the question, why is it that you have 6 drugs approved and yet 75% of patients do not have a recommended phosphate control? Measuring phosphate is not something that requires very complicated tests. It is a simple blood test that can be done routinely in any US hospital, anywhere the blood tests are done. Physicians are very aware of it. So the challenge then becomes that why existing treatments don't solve the problem is threefold. There are three problems. Number one is the pill burden, number of pills that patients have to take. On an average, these patients are taking 20 to 30 pills per day. 50% of that pill burden comes from treatment of hyperphosphatemia. To say it differently so that I can provide you the context and real perspective, these patients are taking 10 pills, perhaps take it 5 to 10 pills with each meal. So they take 10 pills with the breakfast, 10 pills with lunch, 10 pills with the dinner. No wonder they will forget taking these pills. So one problem is that high pill burden. Number two, there are some solutions that are out there that require patients to take lesser number of the pills. That is pills that are uh, given in the form of tablets that need to be chewed. So that is the second problem, that the small number of pills that have to be chewed. So that is a chewing is a problem. And the third problem is these tablets that have to be chewed. They are very large in size, and they taste not so good. There has been a recent entrant in the market, which is Xphozah, called tenapanor. To point about that, they typically, essentially, the label for that Xphozah says it has to be given in patients who fail phosphate binders or in combination of the binders. So it is a newer entrant uh, that can be considered as a newer alternative. But Xphozah doesn't work for many patients, primarily because the phosphate lowering capacity of Xphozah is a little bit limited. It also has an additional side effect which causes diarrhea to patients. It is a very well intended drug, and we believe this could be a great solution for patients. But even with that new entrant in the market, that problem has not been solved because majority of patients are on the binders. That's where the first place they start with. Xphozah label says it has to be given in binder failure or along with binder. That's number two. And we believe that among the binders out there, we have the best possible solution because of the three things, which is we call it three Ps, which is potency. Lanthanum, which is our drug is based on, is one of the most potent drug out there, or most potent phosphate lowering agent that is out there. Number of studies out there, but we have shown data comparing our efficacy to the approved lanthanum drug, which is Posron. So that's P is for potency. Next thing is for palatability. So our drug can be taken as a small single pill. A 500 milligram pill looks like a size of baby aspirin that a patient can take it and swallow it very easily. And third part is the pill burden. As I said, they started off at standard of care at the moment. 50+% of the US patient population is taking Granvella, which on an average is 9 pills. But many patients, when we say average, mean there are some who are lower, there are some higher, but many patients are taking 12, many 15 pills per day, and still not able to control their phosphate. So this, our pill, our drug, oxylantham carbonate, fulfills that promise to be able to reduce the pill burden, create a palatability, and something that is a very high potency.
Got it. Um, in your pivotal study, you showed some great safety and tolerability data from the clinical effective doses of OLC. Could you walk us through
Sure.
these results a little bit?
Our clinical trial was a requirement from the FDA to look for tolerability. So the original intent of the trial was to look for tolerability. Tolerability is defined as discontinuation rate from FDA's perspective. Discontinuation rate means that there is a reason for a patient to stop taking the drug. In our entire clinical trial, the number of patients who were exposed to the drug, who took the drug even for one day, were 86. 5 out of 86 patients, that's roughly around 6% patient, discontinued the drug for any cause related to the treatment during the course of the trial. That 6%, if you compare that to the competitor drug, which is what we are pursuing a pathway, comparing a drug to the competitor drug, which is Fosrenol, is 14% for Fosrenol, 6% for us. That's number one. Number two, the adverse event profile for our drugs, our drug in the trial was really, really low, which is, again, just to give you a number, the two numbers that stand out, and they're all in our public presentation deck, is a diarrhea of 9% and vomiting of 6%. All these drugs, all the phosphate lowering drugs, including tenapanor, and all binders, they all cause some GI irritation because the primary mechanism is to lower the phosphate in the gut. So all these binders have have an adverse event profile, but when you compare our drug versus the market leader, which is Renvela, the diarrhea and vomiting incidence is less than half of what is reported on Renvela's package insert. And lastly, as it relates to efficacy, which I wanted to talk more about it, we saw some significant impressive results. So give me a minute to walk you through that
No, please
clinical
do.
trial.
Take your time. No.
These drugs are not on a fixed doses. In other words, there are some treatments in medicine where you give a fixed dose. So, for example, if an antibiotic is there, most commonly take an antibiotic that most people on the audience may be familiar with is a drug like azithromycin. So you have a fixed dose. You take 2 tablets a day one, and then you take one pill or one tablet and the day two, and so on and so forth. With phosphate-lowering drugs, you have a range of drug doses that are dependent on patient's serum phosphate level. Our drug is indicated in 500 milligram dose, 750 milligram dose, and 1000 milligram dose. In other words, upon approval, a physician can prescribe 500 milligram 3 times a day or up to 1000 milligram 3 times a day. And that was the design of clinical trial. That's what we started with. What is impressive is that before these patients were put on the clinical trial, with the best tolerated dose, meaning their physician had the discretion to give them whatever drug they wanted to give, as much as the patient can tolerate, and as much as physician thought was appropriate for these patients. And with the maximum tolerated dose with the prior therapy, the phosphate lowering that a physician could achieve in these patients was 60%, 60. With 6 weeks of treatment on our drug, that efficacy moved from 60% to 90%. And that is remarkable. We understand this was a small clinical trial. We understand this was a clinical trial setting than real world. And we caveat it out for all of that as a physician, as somebody who has been involved in the industry. We always think about any clinical trial data. We want to be careful about evaluating the data. So I would caution all of that. Having said that, 30% change in the efficacy, even if you discount for the fact that these patients were in a trial setting, that is just remarkable. If the change was 5 or 6%, you could say that's an aberration, but 30% improvement in efficacy is remarkable. It was very impressive to us and those physicians we talked to. Number two is that we saw that 500 milligram tablet, which is again focusing on pill burden issue. These are the pills which is the size of baby aspirin. 500 milligram tablet taken 3 times a day were able to solve the problem for roughly 69% of patients. In other words, that you see the majority of patients end up in taking 3 times a day pill. We also saw that that was the second part, and the third part was the adverse event profile, which again we compare ourselves to Renvela or again Fosrenol. We had one of the lowest adverse event profile we saw. So again, these are three things we saw from a clinical trial: a robust efficacy or really impressive efficacy with a low dose, a 500 milligram tablet taking 3 times a day, and the number third part is that with one of the lowest possible adverse event profile that you could have expected in a clinical trial. It gives us the confidence that as we think about getting the drug approved and launching the drug, we have a real chance to be able to make a difference for patients, create value for investors, and be able to help those patients that I started by saying that 75% of patients in the US do not have adequate phosphate control.
So let me ask you, in terms of you're showing exceedingly strong efficacy, minimal side effects, certainly relative to your competitors. So when you start thinking about approaching commercialization, what do you think about for OLC, and kind of how do you envision stuff?
We have been very focused on taking one step at a time. I talk about it that one could do many different things, but to be able to prioritize focus is the key for us to be able to get to where we are. Roger, what are the most comforting thing and something that gives us a real shot at success, which is to create a commercial success now that the drug has a real potential, real clinical benefit? How do you launch it to be able to get in the market? Is that number of physicians who prescribe these drugs in the US is not that large. In fact, there is a slide in a corporate deck which talks about it that 2,100 physicians that is 2,100 physicians prescribe top, these are top prescribers. They prescribe roughly 50% of the phosphate lowering drug. If you go to the entire number of deciles, so decile is 10% of each segment of market, if you will. Top 5 decile is 2,100. And the top 8 decile comes out to be roughly, give or take, around 6,000 physicians. So a company that is a smaller in size, that intends to be very focused and launch the drug, we can achieve that. We believe we have an opportunity to be able to launch the drug on our own and be able to make a difference. And our intention is that as we go along the year of 2025, from here till potential approval date of June 28, 2025, we have ability to be able to get the market ready by being able to talk to the physicians who get aware of the drug, and also work on building up our own commercial infrastructure. So when the drug is approved, we can launch it and make it a commercial success as quickly as possible.
So, from just a commercialization standpoint, then this would be something that you'd look to have your own sales force.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. We plan to launch it on our own, and as we go along, we find as I always say, that we are not opposed to. We have enough humility to understand that if there is somebody who comes along to join forces with us, we will do so. But at the moment, our entire focus is being able to get the market ready. And your question is that how do you get the market ready? By doing scientific publication, we create awareness in the scientific community about it. By talking to physicians, we are doing virtual ad boards. We're talking to physicians. Prior to starting the company, taking the company public, I had talked to hundreds of physicians, nephrologists, to understand their problem and understand if the drug cuts in the market, what are the key barriers that may cause them concern to be able to prescribe the drug. So there are a number of things we are working on, but the idea is that beyond the launching, hiring the sales force, there are things we can do from here to the approval that we are working on right now. And we can launch a drug on our own, Roger, because as I mentioned to you, the target segment of physicians and prescribers are relatively small.
Yeah. So in terms of, we know the target's small. How big is the opportunity here? And, can you tell us any more about changes in the reimbursement environment this year?
Sure. So building upon the part about launching a drug on our own, I want to just comment on one component of it. We have on our team Dr. Masek, who launched 2 drugs in the same class of the phosphate-lowering drug in the past. One was Renvela. He worked for Genzyme, grew Renvela from starting as a small product to over $1 billion in sales, and the second was Orexia. He's on our team, and we have a number of people we are adding as we go along. So that's number one. Number two is that the market opportunity for this class of drug is really big compared to a lot of other disease conditions. You see over $1 billion in sales. There's 1.25 billion in sales, and these numbers have only gone up and lower. It's the annual sales of these drugs every year in the US. The global market is over $2.5 billion, and you can divide it into half and half. US market 1.25, and the rest of the world is another 1.25 billion. This is a pretty big market opportunity. And the reason I say this to you, because even a small percentage of market share in that $1.25 billion opportunity is a meaningful share for a company like us, for where we are as a company and where we trade in terms of valuation and how much of an impact we can make. And the last part you asked about the reimbursement environment, until December 31st, 2024, these drugs were considered to be a part of Medicare Part D. That is D as in David, which is the benefit plan for Medicare. Come January 1, 2025, they have now been included in the Medicare Part B as in boy. But there are 2 or 3 things I want to just point out. Number one, not all patients are covered by Medicare. So you can think about that this split of the patient population is roughly, there are different numbers out there, but let's just say it's 60, 40, or 70, 30. That means 70% of patients are covered by Medicare, 30% of patients are covered by commercial. So the commercial insurance still covers it the same way that they were doing till last year, which is 2024. Number 2, CMS, which is Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services combined, they decided that in order for the switch to happen for the next 2 or 3 years, at the moment it's 2-year proposal, they will include all the phosphate lowering therapy that come in and they fulfill certain criteria to go through a transition program that has a fancy word called TDAPA. but that reimbursement environment, it only gets better. And number three, upon approval, we plan to expect to get a TDAPA designation that will help both patients and the company to be able to push the drug to the patients who need it.
Got it. You mentioned the PDUFA date, which is June 28th. What work do you still have to do in preparation of a commercial launch between now and June?
So think about this as getting ready to launch the drug. Launch of the drug is not just launching the drug the day it gets approved. It creates we talked some part of it earlier, we're getting our team ready. So we have always prided on being a small and nimble workforce, which we remain to do so, but we can add a few more people. For getting our drug to NDA, which is a monumental task and monumental milestone for us to be able to achieve, we had roughly 15 to 16 full-time employees the day we filed and got the NDA acceptance. So we are adding a few more people. We've hired a few more people in the commercial team. The goal is not to hire an army of people, but to have a few people who can then help us to be ready. So that's really in building up our internal team. That's number one. Number two is creating awareness in the marketplace. Both that means talking to physicians, but there is also other stakeholders. So these, I call them, broadly speaking, healthcare professionals. So these are nurses as well as dietitian, because one of the most important place where a patient makes that decision is dietitian. When dietitian helps a patient to decide which drug, which type of food they should eat, and so on and so forth. So that's a dietitian. So they're healthcare professionals. So we're working on getting in front of these stakeholders. I mentioned to you that this is a class of drug that has a known playbook. We know who are the prescribers. We know who prescribes how much. We have data, and not for data for last two years, but data for much more longer period of time, like last 5, 10 years. So we know who are the physicians. And in our corporate deck, we also have a presentation of US map. Somehow, incidence of diabetes is in certain parts of the country. That is where the dialysis clinics are. That's where the dialysis clinics, physician prescribing these drugs are. So we can target that sales force. And then the goal is to get it ready with regard to reimbursement and being able to have physician prescribe the drug, because the goal is to be able to have a physician write the prescription and patient receive the drug. So there are things which are very tactical, but just to mention a few, getting a reimbursement hub up and running where a physician writes the prescription, but they don't have to worry about whether the patient will get a drug or not. Our goal is to make it as frictionless as possible. And then the last part is that upon approval, both getting the in-house sales rep as well as working on the designation for TDAPA, which is getting a reimbursement code with the CMS. All these part, we are working day and night on this and really focus on getting the drug ready for launch.
Very good. And for my last question, clearly 2025 is going to be super exciting year for Unicycive. What milestones should we be looking for in the coming months when we think about your stock?
So this year, with 2025 is a great year for us. We are really excited. In next 2 quarters, we would be providing more update on the commercial readiness. We are working on creating more awareness. That may mean scientific publications. We have been publishing data on OLC. The goal is to get the entire clinical trial data out there as soon as possible in peer-reviewed journal. Provide more clarity in how we plan to launch. That means getting ready from a manufacturing side, getting ready for commercial supplies readiness. All these updates, we have provided some of them in the past, but more granularity on that. We also have a second drug, which we talked about in the beginning, which is finished phase 1 clinical trial. Our goal is to have a discussion with FDA to understand what is their view about getting to the next part of the regulatory process and next clinical trial on the second drug. Building up our commercial team, even though we don't intend to hire a lot of people, but as we add a few people, being able to provide clarity and update on that. So there'll be a lot of exciting parts ahead. And I think as you have an audience tune in, we'll be providing more of these updates in the coming weeks and coming months. So really exciting time for us.
Yes, it is. Well, Shalab, again, thank you for joining us here today. And thanks to everyone out there who are watching this. If you have any questions or would like to schedule a meeting with Unicycive, Please send me an email at weiss@lythampartners.com. We have additional presentations and fireside chats coming up next, so don't go away yet. Thank you and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Roger, for having me. I appreciate it. And
You're
thank you
very
to our
welcome.
audience for
Thank
your
you.
time.